Let me tell you something. I've heard Hall of Fame speeches, I've heard locker room speeches, but that Ibrahim Traore speech, man, that wasn't just words. That was a game plan for a whole nation. He's not talking to a team, he's talking to a continent, and they're listening.
When Shannon Sharpe said that, everyone in the room burst out laughing, thinking it was just a flashy compliment. But not everyone knew. Those words weren't just spur-of-the-moment emotion. They came from a story very few people outside the inner circle have ever heard. An anonymous source within U.S. diplomatic circles claims that months before that speech, a closed-door meeting took place at a secret location. It wasn't a grand international conference hall, but a small, dimly lit room with a long wooden table and worn-out chairs. There, among a group of strategic advisors and unfamiliar faces, a laptop sat open, playing a video of Shannon Sharpe. And it wasn't playing by accident. According to the source, the video was replayed multiple times, paused at key moments, as if someone was studying how Sharpe controlled his pacing, commanded attention, and made an entire room rise to their feet. What's even harder to believe, in that very room, among the advisors, was a man whose voice made everyone go silent the moment he spoke. Ibrahim Traoré. According to the anonymous source, that meeting had no public schedule. In fact, even those attending were only told the location and time a few hours in advance. When they walked in, there were no nameplates, no cameras, just the ticking of a wall clock and the steady hum of a ceiling fan. On the table were a few thick folders, but what drew every eye was the laptop at the center. The screen was paused on a frame of Shannon Sharpe, his face lit under studio lights, mouth slightly open as if about to drop a killer line. A senior advisor opened the session. Today, we're not talking policy. We're talking about how to deliver policy. A message, if not delivered the right way, dies the moment it leaves the speaker's lips, and this is an example worth studying. The video rolled. Sharpe's voice filled the room, firm and measured, like a coach controlling the heartbeat of the audience. His gaze swept across the crowd, his hands punctuated his words, and each sentence landed with a pause, just long enough for the listeners to draw breath before exploding with him. Traoré sat still, taking no notes, offering no commentary, only staring straight ahead. But according to one person in the room, he would occasionally tilt his head slightly, as if dissecting the structure behind each phrase. When Sharpe spoke about discipline and belief in the collective, Traoré rested his chin on his hand, narrowing his eyes, not in doubt, but as though weighing how to apply it to a completely different stage, the political arena. After the first run, the video was played again. This time, an advisor paused at key moments, breaking them down. This is how you set rhythm, so the listener's emotions don't drift. This is how you land a message, so they carry a single sentence with them long after. Another chimed in. Watch how he owns the space. A single step forward and the whole room locks on him. Traoré still said nothing, but when the video ended a third time, he leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and gave a short smile. One advisor would later recall, "We didn't know what was going through his mind, but it felt like he had just found a new blade for his arsenal." The meeting lasted less than an hour, yet the air inside was thick, as if everyone understood they had just witnessed something important. No minutes were taken, and no one spoke of it in the days that followed. But months later, when Traoré stepped onto the podium and set the hall ablaze, those who had been in that room simply glanced at each other, no words necessary. And the question still hangs. Can a sports commentary become part of a head of state's political strategy? Or was it all just an extraordinary coincidence? 3 weeks after I first heard the story from the initial source, an unexpected email appeared in my secure inbox. The sender signed only as M, leaving no identifiable information except for a temporary address set to self-destruct in 48 hours. The message contained just one line. You've heard half the story. If you want the rest, meet me here. The location was a small bar, tucked deep into a rarely traveled alley. That night, I stepped inside, dim yellow light spilling over walls, plastered with faded posters of old boxing and football matches. In the corner, a man in a dark jacket sat with his back to the door, a glass of whiskey with untouched ice before him. When I sat down across from him, he didn't look up. Instead, He spoke in a low voice. I know what you're looking for, and I know who's been talking to you. His voice was deep and deliberate, each word weighed carefully. But they only showed you what happened inside that room. I will tell you why that video was in that room in the first place. According to M, it all began with an unplanned meeting between a member of Traoré's advisory team and an African-born entrepreneur living in Atlanta, a longtime fan of Shannon Sharpe. Over a private dinner, the topic of the art of crowd control came up, leading the entrepreneur to share a video he believed every leader should watch at least once. They watched it right there at the dinner table, M said. And I heard that Traoré wasn't there, but the message was passed along. Not long after, that video made its way onto a USB drive traveling from Atlanta to Ouagadougou through 3 stops and at least 2 intermediaries. What caught my attention most was M's remark. The person who gave the video to the advisory team had no idea it would become part of the preparation for an important speech. He thought it was just a cultural gift, a way of sharing inspiration. But as M emphasized, when an idea lands in the right hands, it can turn into something far more powerful than any shouted slogan. As M stood to leave the bar, he left me with one final line. If you want the whole story, you'll need to find out who placed that USB drive on Traoré's desk. And so, from a seemingly harmless sports video, the story opened another layer of mystery, one that perhaps only those standing between 2 continents truly understand. The final lead took me to a small town over 200 kilometers from the capital, a place few would ever think of when speaking about politics or diplomacy. Life here moved slowly. Children played soccer on dusty roads, the smell of freshly baked bread drifted from a corner shop, and the crackle of an old radio spilled from red brick houses. The man I needed to meet was known as Bako, a former technician who once worked for an international media services company. According to M, Bako was the last person to handle the USB before it landed on Ibrahim Traoré's desk. I found him in the back lot of a repair shop, hunched over an old generator he was dismantling. When I introduced myself, Bako simply looked up, stared for a few seconds, and said, "If you came for that story, you have to promise to tell it exactly as I say it. No more, no less." He explained that the USB had been given to him by an old friend, a freelance journalist working on a piece about the African diaspora in America. He told me it was a gift from Atlanta. I didn't know what was on it, only that I was to deliver it to someone in the president's advisory team. No name, no paperwork, just a small black stick like a million others. The strange part was, along with the USB, Bako received a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just 6 words in French. Pour le discours à venir. For the upcoming speech. Bako admitted his curiosity got the better of him. Before passing it on to the contact, he plugged the USB into his personal computer. I saw a single video file. The name was sharpfocus.mp4. I opened it, and there was a large man speaking English, eyes sharp as a blade. I didn't understand the words, but it felt like he was speaking directly to me. When I asked if he believed Traoré had seen the video before writing the speech, Bako fell silent for a long moment. I can't be certain, but I know this. Weeks later, when I watched the speech on TV, there were moments. I heard the same rhythm, the same emphasis, and that's when I knew the message had reached exactly where it was meant to go. Before we parted, Bako gripped my hand and looked me straight in the eye. You need to understand. In politics, not everything is recorded in signatures or minutes. An idea can start at a small dinner table, travel thousands of miles, and end with the applause of an entire nation. A few weeks after meeting Bako, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a black USB stick, identical to the one he had described, along with a neatly folded slip of paper. No long message, just 2 handwritten words in blue ink. Continue. I plugged the USB into my computer, my heartbeat faster than usual. Inside, there wasn't just the sharpfocus.mp4 file Bako had mentioned, but also a new folder labeled Notes. Inside were dozens of text files, each only a few short sentences, all revolving around familiar themes: discipline, collective spirit, strength from community. Stranger still, at the bottom of one file was a line in French. Inspiration has no nationality. I wondered, was this proof that Shannon Sharpe's video truly became part of the preparation for Ibrahim Traoré's speech? Or was it simply an elaborate prank, crafted by someone who understood both worlds, sports and politics, all too well? In the days that followed, I tried to trace the origin of the USB, but every lead ended in a dead end. The shipping address was fake. The data carried no verifiable metadata. It was as if someone had erased every trace, leaving me, and anyone hearing this story, only a blank space to imagine. And perhaps that's the true power of this story. It doesn't need a clear answer. Because somewhere, between a roaring stadium and a solemn podium, between a sports commentary and a national message, there may exist an invisible thread, one only those on the inside truly know. As for us, standing on the outside, we can only ask ourselves, can a single moment, a single sentence cross an ocean and change how an entire nation sees its future?